Okay. So my name is Logan Baranowski. I'm a student here at BYU. I'm studying information systems, just doing the undergrad program. I'm a teaching assistant for an Excel class that we teach for graduate students, and it's called AIS 515. It's called Spreadsheets for Business Analysis. We don't really go too in-depth in VBA. We actually have a VBA class, but we focus a lot on functionality of the actual spreadsheet and writing functions in VBA. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And we'll just kind of get into it. We'll have examples. I'll kind of give you like intro, and then we'll start doing some coding. So you'll want to be swapping between the PowerPoint and have Excel open, ready to go. Okay, so just to start off, so just kind of a little Bill Gates thing here. You know, when it comes to data analysis, I have Excel, right? And so my friends say I should have majored in Excel, but it's just me. They don't have that. So just kind of talking a little bit about VBA, just for starters. So just to kind of think about it, every function, so a function in Excel is something that gets past something. A function is something you want to get a return from. In programming, it's called a method or other things, just depending on the language that you're working in. But it really isn't meant to make changes to your worksheet. It's meant to give you something output. So you're saying, let me give you something, you're going to process it, analyze it, and give me an output. So it's usually a single output in one cell. So just kind of like basics, parameters are just things that are going to go on the inside of your function. And so you can pass parameter 1, parameter 2, parameter 3. You can pass whatever you want. And in Excel, the nice thing is you can actually build your own custom functions. So maybe at your work, you have some sort of proprietary formula that you want to use that you have to type all these like weird calculations, and you have certain drivers or things like that. But you might as well just build your own, and then you can just adjust it in the VBA, and then you can actually share those workbooks with everyone, and then you can share those things. Just kind of a FYI, if you want to save your project, which I recommend doing, because sometimes in VBA you have issues and your Excel crashes, as some of you might know. You want to make sure you save it, and it's going to be a .xlsm file, or you can do XLAM, but let's just do M. An AM is an add-in file. That's if you're wanting to share it, and then you can do an add-in plugin, and you can pass your macros around to other people. And also, just if you have any questions, just like raise your hand, like even generic questions, like I'd be happy to answer. So, and just kind of another thing, functions are stored in modules within VBA. So when we get in there, you'll see that we're going to add modules to make sure we actually write our code in a module. If you write it right on the sheet, it doesn't make it global. The scope is very limited to that sheet only, and that's really unlikely for most spreadsheets because you want to be able to use it on any of your worksheets that you have open. Okay, so just talking about the data types. Data types in Excel are just like data types in any other programming language. They're a spot in memory that holds something. So you can hold an integer, they hold specific values, solid numbers, no decimals. But we can do doubles. You can hold a whole range of things. You can actually look on this one of these you can look online and they can tell you exactly what fits into what data type. Excel is kind of nice. It's supposed to be friendly and easy to use. You can put everything as a variant. It does slow your machine down just like in other languages by not specifying your actual data type. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're doing a lot of formulas or a lot of functionality, you may want to consider really specifying what type of data type. But in this thing, we might just put variant. If you leave off the data type in Excel, it also is smart enough to just say, I guess you just want it to be variant. I'll figure it out. It's kind of like Santa's bag, like put whatever you want in here, I'll figure it out. If it blows up, it blows up, but if it doesn't, we'll work with it. So that's kind of its fun thing. So declaring variables in VBA, you have to dim them, but just kind of an interesting note is when you're actually making a function. So you can name your function whatever you want. So you could call it my function, or I don't know, USPS function or something, whatever your company name is. Maybe you have some proprietary name, or this is our driver 7 or whatever. You can call it whatever you want. You can put your parameters in here, and then we're going to say as at the end, we're going to put our type of output. And we'll start seeing this when we start typing some functions in just a minute here. So I'm actually going to open up my Excel. So you should all have your Excel, right? And I'm just going to show you how to add the ribbon here. So if we go to options here, we can go to customize ribbon, and I'm just going, let's go like this. And you can see what I'm doing. So in Excel, let's go File,
and options here, and we'll go to customize ribbon. And I'm gonna just add the developer ribbon on here. If you have Mac, it's a little different. Sorry about that, I didn't do that. And then now you'll have this nice developer window here for Visual Basic. You can click right on it like this, or the shortcut is Alt F11 if you're, Alt F11 if you're, well, I guess not. I've got something else going on here. Alt F11, there we go. Alt F11 will also open it up if you're on the Windows side, which is kind of the shortcut, toggles between, because if you hit Alt F11 again, it goes right back to your spreadsheet. So I usually like to have this open, and I split the screen just like this so I can have both of them open here. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to save mine as a .xlsm file. Doesn't matter where, but I just in case we have an issue, constantly save workbook VBA. Okay. So you'll see there's a bunch of things here in your project. You may have other spreadsheets open. You'll notice those over here as well. We'll just select right onto our workbook VBA right here. And you can right click anywhere in here, and we're going to say insert, and I'm going to say module. This is the best place to do your coding. It makes these functions global to your worksheet. So when we're defining I don't know how to put this. When we're defining a function in here, so we'll just do something like this. We'll say function name. It doesn't matter what you call it, but you have to say function name. That just gives Excel kind of its what's going in here. And then we're going to make a parenthesis. Just like in Excel, you'll notice that in the function you can put something in there, or you can leave it blank. Let's actually go back to this for a second. I think, well, I don't know how to get out of this. No. Oh, there we go. Okay. So some people get into VBA and they start coding and they go, well, there's this great function in the actual Excel side that I like to use, but where is it? I want to be able to use it. Like I want to be able to use sum if, or I want to be able to use sum. Immediately you can just do plus and plus and plus, just like a typical programming language. So just to keep in mind, you can actually just type in the VBA window application dot worksheet function, and we'll actually do that here. And you'll start noticing dot, and then if you do dot, you should get a drop down of all of the functions. VBA for Mac, probably not. I don't know, is my assumption. So we'll go like this. We'll go worksheet function dot. And you'll notice that there's a lot of these functions in here, and these are functions that you can actually use within Excel. You'll see average if, average ifs, and if you're familiar with those, you can actually use those within your function. So just kind of keep that in mind, that you can use what's already in Excel. Don't recreate the wheel kind of thing. You know, don't waste time on that. They've already have these functions built, so let's use them. The weird thing though, you'll notice that in Excel, you get this nice little window, something like this. When you start typing in, they say, oh, you put your range in here, then you put your criteria, and then these brackets mean optional right here, and you'll see average range. So you can kind of put what you want in there. In VBA, it's not quite as nice. They just say argument 1 or arg1 as range, arg2, and then in brackets arg3. And they're saying the output can be as double, basically. So pretty much most answers that you can get. And so sometimes what I like to do is I'll open up in Excel and I'll say, okay, I can't remember what order. Maybe I think it's criteria range. Open up in Excel, and I'll rewrite it in VBA just to make sure I get the syntax correct. Okay. And then just kind of notice that there are some things that are still the same. So if you're doing text cleaning, text formulas, they actually use the exact same terminology. And the nice thing when you use VBA functions, they actually tell you what they are. So they actually say what you're putting in here, and they're really nice. But they also have a lot of other features. You can pull file paths. You can write to the command prompt. You can actually write to the shell window. You can actually do a lot of stuff within VBA. So just kind of keep that in mind. Sometimes if you can't find it in the VBA if you can't find it in the worksheet function, it probably exists on the Excel. So sometimes I have to look online and say, for example, like date formulas. Oh, how do I do the year function in Excel? And they say, oh, it's just year. It's not worksheet function dot something else. So that's why I kind of put this VBA dot, but you actually don't have to put this because you're in the VBA window. So they just assume everything's VBA. So, any questions? No? Okay. Okay, let's get to the fun part. Let's write our first function here. So we're just gonna do something just very simple, just so you can kind of see it. So we're gonna take input one, multiply by 2, take input 2, multiply it by 3, and then we're gonna sum the two together, okay? So let's go back to our Excel window here, and I'm gonna open up my editor, and I'm gonna say function, and I'm just gonna say my function here, and we can put input 1. You can put whatever you want. You could put T, R, set, like whatever you want. I don't believe numbers will work, but it's just kind of the syntax naming. You can say what the inputs are going to be. So I could say input 1. I know they're going to be numbers. Maybe they're going to be whole numbers. So I could put as integer here. I'm going to leave them off. And so Excel is just going to go, okay, I'm just going to, whatever you throw in there, I'm going to just give you what you put in. And I'll give you that. So we'll just put input 1, input 2. And then our output, I'm also going to leave it blank. So you could put output, like you know it's going to be a certain type of data type output. You can put an as here, but we'll just leave it off. And that just gives us a variant or a var output. And once you hit enter, you'll actually notice you get this lovely little end function up here at the top. And that's how you know you're doing this right. Excel doesn't like spelling errors, so it will actually start flagging you if you can't move forward. So we said that we're going to do input. So we're going to take input 1 and we're going to multiply it by 2. So I'm going to say input 1, or actually let's do this. So we're going to say my function is going to be equal to input 1 times 2, right? Plus input 2 times 3, something like that. And you have to eventually somehow put what you're outputting. So my function's right here, and we're saying output is going to be this input times 2 plus this input times 3. So now if you did everything correct, you actually should go over here and you'll hit equals my function, and you'll actually notice your function starts to pop up in your normal Excel window here. We can hit tab. You can actually hit this FX button here, insert function, and you'll notice right here, this input 1 and input 2 are actually in there. So whatever you name them, whatever your company names them, you can put those in there. It adds a grade. So we're saying, okay, let's put in a 2 and we'll put in a 3. And you'll actually notice that it looks like it's going to work. So maybe we'll do 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4, 4, and we can do this. It equals my function, comma 1. Copy these down. You'll notice that those start working, okay? So that's our first function, very basic, but works really well. So let's start getting into a little more fun, I think. Okay. So you should have gotten something like this, and you notice how the input 1 came out 2 and 3 is 13, right? And it just depends on however you set it up. Sometimes you have to check your math. I usually like to make my function and go, okay, I know what the output's supposed to be. Let's do it on some test data, and let's actually make sure we're getting the right outputs, right? Okay. One other function just kind of keep in mind is mod. I actually use this a lot, and a lot of programmers end up using the modulus a lot. In some languages, it's a % sign to divide by. In Excel, it's just mod. So you say what you're taking. So 4 mod 17 is equal to 17 over 4 or something like that. But the thing about the mod function, it's actually giving you the remainder. And just kind of a little background on mod, it's short for modular or clock arithmetic. And actually, if you think about it, so what you do is, so for example, for a clock, so say you have something divided by 12. So we have 25 divided by 12. You can take a measuring tape that's 12 long, and you say, okay, we can wrap it around once, that's 12. We wrap it around again, 24, and then we still have 1 remainder. So the remainder is actually going to be 1, and so that's the remainder of the arithmetic, and that's just a little background on mod, if anybody was curious. I don't know if I ever was.
Can you comment on some of the uses?
Some of the uses?
Yeah.
Looking for even numbers, so you could divide by, so like you could take the mod of 2, you could take mod 2 of something, so like of 13 and give you a remainder, so you know it's going to be an odd number. Or maybe you want to know if something's divisible by 3 or by 4, same type of thing. You would just see it should be equal to 0 if it's actually equal to that. Otherwise, then
that would kind of be like an if statement case there.
Good question though. So I actually wrote a nice little function here. So write a function to see whether a number is divisible by 3. So in the code here, I actually just wrote it out here for you so we can actually just copy it in here. So, whoops, just make sure you don't copy that thing right at the top there. So go like this, and we'll go into our VBA window, and I'm just going to paste this in here. And just kind of a weird thing, for comments in Excel, it's this like just a single quote or a single apostrophe. But for some reason, if you copy it out from somewhere else, it puts it as this like whatever it is. And so you just have to delete that and put a regular one in, and you'll notice the line turns green. And so that's just an error from copying between other editors. So now we'll see what this does. So for our examples, like if we have, so this says the remainder info, we're putting in the number and divide by something. So if we have, so we'll put remainder info, and the first input is going to be number. So if we do, for example, like 12, we want to divide it by 4, right? I actually wrote this nice little formula here. So it says 12 divided by 4 is equal to 3, remainder 0. So like you have a third grader, right, going to school and learning long division, and they have to do the remainder and all that stuff. You can say, oh, let me just check your work really quickly, and you don't actually have to do all the calculations yourself, and let Excel do all the hard work for you, I guess. It's probably not that difficult for third grade math, but I don't know, things are a lot harder than I think when we went to school. I see my nephews doing things, and I'm like, that is a lot more than I was doing when I was your age. So you can write this function, and you're like, oh, let me just run it in my spreadsheet here, and I'll just check it for you. And anyway, so or teach them how to do this, and then they can check it themselves. So that's just one use case there. So let's go back to this. Okay. Alrighty. So just kind of a like common thing, I think, you get writing your Excel thing, you're at work, you're like, man, this is like the coolest thing at work. You're like, hey boss, come over here, let me show you. And you bring it over to your boss, and then that lovely little window pops up that says Excel stopped working, and the thing's starting to flow, and it says, what do you want to do? And you're like, I didn't hit save, I didn't hit save, I didn't hit, that's all you're thinking right now. It's, I didn't hit save, I didn't hit save. What's going on? So that's just kind of I think everybody's been there. We all know what that's like. So that's just one thing. Okay, so let's do, in this function, I actually put this one in here. I did another mod in here. So this is divisible by 3. So let's copy this out. And all we're saying is whether or not the number is divisible by 3. So let's put this into our Excel here. Let's go like this, number divisible by 3, and I'm going to open up my VBA. I'm going to say, so let's put 3, 5, 9, 15, 10, and then we'll say function divisible by 3, and you should have that pop up, and let's hit enter there. Let's copy that down. And it looks like things are working here, so let's see, what do I want to show you guys here? Let's go. This number is not divisible by 3. Okay, right. Okay, perfect. Any questions about any of these functions that we've done so far, or like any other use cases that you might want to do? Okay. That's the nice thing about a workshop. You just kind of show you guys what I want to teach you, and then you can go from there. Okay. So here's another thing just kind of about debugging. So I'm going to show you like just kind of basics how to debug your functions, because it's a little different than debugging an actual VBA sub or a procedure that you've made in Excel. Just kind of a funny thing here. So here's a little Dilbert. According to your absurdly complicated financial model, we can double revenue by increasing absenteeism. To be fair, there might be an error or two in the Excel spreadsheet. Maybe, but I think I owe it to our stockholders to poison the captures. For sure. So just, got to make sure there's always going to be an error or two in your spreadsheet, but let's just work through that. So just kind of like talking about things like, why do we want to debug our formulas? It's really good practice. We also should probably make sure that our functions actually work before we actually give them to someone else. Because someone else says, oh, I used your function, it was so great, I'm using it all the time. And you start looking at some of their numbers, you go, oh, you've got some really bad output there. That's not actually what that function's supposed to return, or it's returning an error. So they've maybe put some error statements in there and made sure that it just does blanks or something, you're like, well, it's supposed to actually calculate something here rather than give you a blank answer. One nice thing that Excel on Windows does, I'm using a Mac here, so I don't mean to like diss the Apple community, but Windows and Apple, their software is just they're not working together very well with that. So in the VBA window, you can actually notice there's this debug button up here. You can actually click compile VBA project. So for example, if I took off this like if statement right, oh, hang on, let's go like this. Let me open up what I'm showing you. So on the end if right here, so for example, if I take this off, this is a syntax error, but I'm going on, I'm coding, it's not giving me the red error, I have no idea what's going on. Something you can actually do is you click up here, debug in the top window, and you can click compile VBA project. And it goes, hey, you actually didn't end your if statement there. And you're, oh, right, you have to put end if because VBA is different than other languages. I actually have to put an end on there or end if, or you put a colon somewhere that there's not supposed to be. It'll actually flag those. When you open Excel as well, it runs this compile, but the problem is it only shows one error at a time. So you have to, so you're like, well, it gave me one error, I fixed it, and now you go through and it starts running, and all of a sudden, bam, you've got another error. You're like, but it didn't say I had an error when I compiled it. You can actually just keep clicking this button. So you can just keep clicking this button, or you can close and reopen. But I actually found this button here. It's quite convenient, really nice to use. And it'll let you keep checking that until you have no more problems. So let's see, let's go back to here. Okay, so we're just gonna talk a little about how to debug. Okay, so when you're debugging, and in a lot of languages, you kind of want to add a stop. The problem with a function is they're designed to just run and give an output. You can't just say, let's start here and just start stepping through something. Like if you've used VBA before, you can just step through your formula to kind of see what's happening. The problem with the function is it actually has to calculate, it actually has to do something, because you have to give it an input to actually give you an output, right? So we'll actually go back to our function here, and we'll say, let's see, so let's go like this. Okay, so I just want to debug this previous thing that we did here. So it said this number is divisible by 3, right? So what we'll do is we'll go to our VBA window, and let's go like this, and you'll hover on the side here, and you'll notice that if you try and click in some places that you can't add a stop, you won't get this red dot. So the idea is that adds a stop, and once it enters this function, it's going to stop there. So you want to add a stop, because I can't just hit F8 to step through as you might have done before, or going like this and step into it. It doesn't ever start because you can't hit play on a function because it isn't like a procedure. It's not a program that's running. So for example, now you'll notice, let's go over to one of our functions here, function divisible by 3. Let's hit enter because it's going to recalculate. It's going to re-enter this code here, and oh, okay. So now you notice how this is highlighted in yellow, and that's probably familiar to some of you if you've used VBA. And we'll go in here, and I added this locals window down here at the bottom. I really recommend adding that. You can go up here to view, and you can add the locals window right here. If you click on that, then you can actually just drag it down here, and it should resize to go down here. I like to keep that here in the immediate window. But the nice thing that I like about this is as I step through this function now, so you can hover, there's an alternative. You can hover over these functions, and sometimes they'll give you what they're equal to. So you notice if I hover over this, it says divisible by 3 is equal to nothing right now. But it's also right here, and I like to just kind of step through it because you might say, oh yeah.
What is the locals box showing?
The locals is showing all of your variables in this function that we're looking at right now, and it's showing what their exact value is right now.
Okay.
So now,
is it local variables? Is that like,
yeah.
Okay.
So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, so as we go from this line, let's see what all the variables are. Okay, now we move to one line. What changes? And you can watch it basically as the values change down here. So I'll hit F8, but you can also add this. Let's see. View toolbars. You can add the debug and the edit toolbar. I have those as well. You can put those here, or you can press F8, and you'll notice it starts to move through here, and these numbers start to change. So divisible by 3 is our function name because that's actually a variable, because that's what we're outputting.
So we're looking to see what the value is going to change. So in this first if statement, it says number 1 mod 3, right? Or the number that we put in, because that's just our input. It's saying if it's mod 3 and it's equal to 0, that means there's no remainder. So we know that it was evenly divisible by 3. So it entered that first if statement because that's true. And it's actually going to you'll notice that these local windows have changed down here. Number is divisible by 3. But you may have something else later down in your function that's changing it because you're saying, well, I have it programmed, but then for some reason you did another if statement lower and it changes it to another variable and you're getting the wrong output. So that's why I like to debug, to kind of step through a few problems, especially if I'm having issues. Some of us are great programmers, right? And we never have to debug, but I don't know any programmer like that. So that's just what we deal with. So we'll hit F8 and it'll go through, and once it's finished, it's now going to start calculating. Now you'll notice it's calculating this next one because it's when you hit refresh, it's actually calculating all of the sheets on your function, and this is where we actually have a stop. So now you'll notice this value is 5. So it's moving down to our second thing here. If we had F5, you'll notice that it starts moving through these. It moves to the next stop. That just hits play. Or you can just click and remove the stop here and just hit play, and it'll exit all of those for you. So now we've got our lovely thing here. And yeah, any other questions about debugging in VBA? No? Okay, perfect. Okay. Just kind of something that just kind of an error type thing. So we may want to add some sort of like an if statement in there. And in this last statement, maybe you want it to be divisible by 3, but you also want people to be able to pass, like somebody who doesn't know your spreadsheet, they may start copying it down, they copy in a letter or something that's formatted as text. And that kind of blows up your spreadsheet later on, as a lot of us have had experience. You have to copy it from this column, change the format, copy and paste it over, paste it values, and make sure you're actually in the right values. And we've all had that issue, and it spent a lot of time worrying about it, dealing with that type of thing. And so I actually wrote this function. It says if the number is equal to 7, else if it's greater than 7, let's give an output saying that it's greater than 7, less than 7, or not a number. So you should be able to copy this. So this is the first way that I thought, oh, this is how you write it, right? So we'll paste it in here. And let's go like. So this should be your output here. Some of you may be feeling this way or have felt this way before. So if that example, you start working it through, if you do this 2 here, 2, 5, 7, 9, ASDF not equal to a number, you'll notice that I think one of these has an error. Less than 7, equal to 7, greater than 7, not a number. Maybe I fixed the screenshot here, but I believe if you type this in here, we've got the wrong answer. So let's put this 2, 5, 7, 9. We'll say equal 7. Do that. Oops. Oh, got to fix our comment here. We've copied out. Play here. Less than 7, equal to 7, greater than 7, ASDF. Oh, okay. So that's a problem. So we notice, wait a second, I thought I wrote my function to say, well, if it's not a number, it should be able to figure this out. ASDF isn't greater than 7 though, right? You see this right here? Let me make this a little bigger. So right here we notice, oh, ASDF says it's greater than 7. Well, that's not right. That should say not a number. That's how I program my functionality. And so this is a great thing to debug, because you'll want to do some test examples like try and break your function, see what happens when it breaks. When somebody puts in like a 7.5 or adds an 8 or A134, and maybe you want to account for that. Maybe you want them to be able to pass that through, and you can clean your data so you can kind of start molding your functions to exactly the way you want it. So something that I found with this one is I actually just rearranged the if statement based on debugging, just because I think we're short on time, or we're going to be. And I just moved everything around a little bit, and I just had it do
this, and I actually wrote another function. I had to look up and say, how can I have Excel tell me whether or not it's equal to a text? They don't have is text, or they do, well, they don't have is text, but so I used is number. So I said, okay, if I pass something that's not a number and it's false, because it should, ACF is going to be false on that, it's going to give us false, then we'll actually say not a number here. So we actually just change this function a little bit, and let's go like this. Control C, and I'll go over here to our VBA editor. We'll paste this in, and now let's just click on one of these and hit oh, our lovely comment here. Play again. And you'll notice, oh, now we're getting not a number here. So it's a really just kind of a good thing to just double check on there to really make sure that you're debugging, because that's really critical, especially if you're going to be sharing these wonderful functions that are going to save people time and energy and all this stuff. But if you're causing more problems, then they'll just stop using it. So that's always just something to consider. Okay. In this presentation, I don't want to go into detail, but I wrote some other functions, just some things that you might want to be using. So I use this function called nstr, and what it's the nice thing, this doesn't actually exist in regular Excel very well. It actually will count how many times this string that you pass in there is actually available in your variable that you're looking at. So in this example, let me make this bigger so we can see it. So in this example right here, so like I have my name here, Logan Baranowski, and I'm trying to say, okay, here's my parameter that I'm passing. So in this case, we're passing this full name here. And maybe you want to pass and you're looking for all the Joes that work at the place. Maybe you want to do something like give them a bonus or something, or it's their birthday or something. Like, you can put whatever you want. Maybe you have some output from some other data from another system, and you want to quickly just analyze it. And so what we'll actually use here is you can use this in str. So we'll pass some parameters. So for example, we're passing Logan Baranowski, and it says in str. So what this actually does is this is going to give us a count. So if my name appeared here twice, so if I said Logan Baranowski, in string is going to say Logan appears in there twice, and it's going to give me the number 2. So anything greater than 0 means that it's at least occurring once. In Excel, there's kind of a workaround. You can use is number. You'll see a lot of ways to do it online. You say, oh, use is number. You can do true, false, do an if statement, do all this stuff. VBA just has this great nstr. Like, just use that. It's really nice, really slick. And so I wrote here, so if Logan's in there, then your name is here, or maybe we could even pass in what name we're looking for. So we could actually make 2 variables there. Like maybe we can say, let's look up for all the Logans, let's do this. Then let's look up all the Joes and see how many there are. And if there's nothing in there, maybe we'll just return this as a blank, or however you want to return it. This is just another great way that I think that you can really use Excel functions to really just automate a lot of your work and even just visually just quickly analyze data. And that's a great thing that Excel is used for. This is just kind of talking a little about the trim function. And I think if you've been using Excel a lot, you've probably become familiar with the trim. Trim, what it does is it takes all the spaces off the ends, because sometimes when you output from your ERP system or your accounting system, it puts all these spaces at the front of your account numbers. So you're doing a VLOOKUP on this, and you can't find anything. You're like, but I see 1, 2, 3, 4 here. I look on my VLOOKUP table. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. What on earth is the problem? Well, and you find out, oh, there's actually 80 spaces at the front there, but they're hidden because Excel just likes to display everything nicely, and we can't figure it out. We don't know what's wrong. So actually, you can actually use this kind of similar thing here. If you look at the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious word here, in this example, it says it's 34 characters long. It's actually not. I believe it's 34. So I had to check that. So you can actually, nice thing, just typical text formulas. They're really easy, and it's a common thing that you should really be using Excel for, because it's really quick, really fast, and really easy to use. So notice here I just embedded the trim. So I said trim our input, then give me the length. And that's what it does. So you've got to really be good with your order of operations in Excel. And I tell it to my students all the time. They go, well, why isn't this working? I said, oh, because you've got a parenthesis here and a parenthesis here, and this is not doing this correctly. So you really have to be good with your PEMDAS. So
going back to elementary school, and please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Like you really got to use that in Excel, and in most programming languages, it's just kind of an innate thing. Like you do it all the time, but got to really kind of watch these things and kind of think, okay, well, what's gonna actually apply first? And in a function like this, you would do your inner parenthesis, then you do your outer parenthesis, and that's just how those functions work in regular math too. In arithmetic, if you're having trouble with that, pick up a textbook from 3rd grade, and we can probably find some explanation there for you. So one thing, okay, so here's another thing about Excel. For the past 3 weeks, I've been opening the same unfinished Excel spreadsheet every time you walk by. I think we've all been there, maybe, I don't know. Like, oh, I'm working on that data analysis thing, and oh, I just wrote all these VBA functions that actually cuts the time down to like 1 hour instead of this 20-hour project you told me. And I'm still working on it, even though it took me an hour. I just gotta, keep up on my, what are the games that you played? I don't know, like I'm playing Solitaire on my phone, or that's all I play on my phone. And whatever you're doing, Farmville, I don't know what people do anymore. I guess that's going back. So something that I wrote here, I'm really all about the output, because in this, I like this. This selected cell is 1 character long. Let's go back here. I love the screenshot I took because I'm missing what you're even doing here. Let's go here. So let's copy. Oh, what was it? Oh, I have it right here. That's why. Okay. Okay, let's just put this into our VBA editor right here. So if I have the letter T and the letter the and them, right? Those are some good examples here. Let's do equals selected cells, because that's what we've named our function over here. So you can name it whatever you want. Like I said, just kind of emphasizing, you can name it whatever you want. That's the beauty thing about programming. It's your language. You don't have to call it sum. You can call it add my numbers. Like, we don't care. Like the system doesn't care. You can even rename the functions that are in Excel. If you don't like VLOOKUP, you could call it lookup from this number, I guess. Look up on this other table. You can call it whatever you want. So I wrote this great if statement here. I really like it. So this says the selected cell is equal to 1. And these ones say selected. Oh, I think we're just, there we go. So you'll actually notice here, I wrote an if statement here. So see how this is 1 character long? So I just wrote a nice little if statement just to make my output really clean, because in my mind, I get really weird about that stuff. Like, cell is 1 character long, not 1 characters long. And like I said, with programming, just you can change it. That's the beauty about VBA, and that's what I really love about Excel is I use Excel all the time, but I even customize it to make it exactly what I want, because maybe I want it to do something different. Maybe I want to do, who knows what I want to do. I have till 9:30, right? Sorry, okay, perfect. So yeah, just write a little if statement here, and these are just giving you some ideas that maybe you can apply to current things. So let's go back to our little PowerPoint here, and we're going to talk about using loops. So I don't know, does anyone have a good example of when you would use a loop? There's a good example here, but why do we use loops in programming?
You're repeating the same step.
Yeah, you're repeating the same step over and over and over again, and rather than writing this line of code like 20 times or having your function like embedded within itself to do the same thing over and over and over again, let's just make a loop and just like have a loop through that right in your spreadsheet. It's really great. I'm working as a consultant right now for a company, and I wrote a VBA add-in for them, and I concatenate all this data together so it actually looks nice on their website. So it has all these enters and returns in it, and I'm querying a lot of stuff within that, and it's really helpful. And you can really just quickly automate your stuff. When you actually run it in runtime, it takes like a second to run. For me to do that and write all the code, it could have taken hours just to really make all these if statements and cases and all that stuff. So you can just embed it right in there. So what we'll do here is we'll actually say, let's use a loop to take a range of values and use the semicolon as a delimiter. But actually, I'm going to change this on the fly here.
So it's actually on the next spreadsheet here. So let's go here. Let's copy this. It's version 1. Let's hit enter here. Let's put that in there. And the comment actually copied over for some reason. That's a change. And we're going to say cells together. So let's put my name is Logan Baranowski. That's who I am. And we're going to say let's do cells together. And we're going to be inputting a range here. So you notice here that I actually specified that we're putting in a range. If you left this off here, Excel would notice that you're putting in a range, so it just figures it out. But like I said, it can slow down your programming speed. So if you know the data type and you know it's always going to be a range, and the nice thing about ranges in Excel is it can be one cell, or it can be a million cells, or it can be multiple dimensional type things. So, but I like to put them on there just to kind of really show that this is a range. So in the class of T4, sometimes we put RNG as range, and we're like, oh, so when I'm coding, it's RNG. I'm like, no, you can name it whatever you want. It could be called my range, it could be called XYZ, or selected cells, or concatenated cells. You can call it whatever you want. I just called it any name right here. And we actually put this delimiter here, but I think we're gonna make this a little more complicated. So let's run this first to make sure it works. I'm just gonna expand this here. My name is Logan Baranowski. Okay, so I like this, except for this example, maybe I don't want to have this semicolon at the end here. So in Excel, like normal, you're like, okay, well, I know how to do that. Let's just go and, I guess I have it in here, but it's just not quite right. So you'll notice you're like, well, I remember in Excel, if I take the left of everything, then I take the length and I subtract 1, it should get rid of the last character on here. But if you actually look at this formula here, we're actually adding a semicolon and a space. So that's actually 2 characters. So there's 2 options. We could trim our output and then take off 1. That's one option. Or we can just take 2 off, and that should fix that here. So let's take off 2 here. And let's go back over here. Let's hit enter. And oh, that pesky delimiter's gone. But maybe we wanted to say, okay, like I want people to be able to use this, but let's let them put in whatever character they want. Okay. So let's go back over to our VBA editor window, and I'm just going to put a comma. So I'm going to add another input. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to call it delim for delimiter, or whatever you want to call it. Let's just call it delim. And then we're going to say, instead of putting this in down here, the semicolon, we're going to say and concatenate on the delimiter, okay? So let's go like this, delim. Okay. So now let's hit enter. Let's see what's going on here. So it's saying value because we didn't give it all of its inputs here, okay? Can everybody see this here? So it's saying, oh, you were supposed to have a delimiter here. I don't know what you're doing here. And we didn't put like an if statement on here to say if they don't put anything in, let's just keep it blank, or making it optional, like an optional parameter. And let me just show you that, because I actually just learned how to do that the other day. You just write this. If you want something to be optional, you just put optional right in front of it, and you'll notice it turns the blue and makes it capitalized, and that's how you know. And you'll actually notice now in here, oh, you can't see it really in here, but if we use the function somewhere else in our VBA, cells together, you'll notice that it starts building this for you just lovely, and it has regular, and then in brackets for optional, just like in regular Excel, that means an optional variable. But we don't want this to be optional. We want them to actually put a delimiter in here. So I'm going to click into this so we can see it. So let's put in like an asterisk, okay? Let's see if that worked. So why does it not like that? Let's try. Oh, because I wrote this down here. Play. Okay, so now I actually have different variations of this, and we're using asterisk. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert another column here, just so you can kind of see this. So let's do one with an asterisk. We'll do an ampersand. Let's put a space at the end of these. Let's put a percentage sign, put an underscore, put a dash here, and then instead of doing this, we can just reference this delimiter, because maybe at your company they want the output to be semicolon delimited, right? Because they want to input it back into their system, and that's just how their program's going to read it. It's going to work really well. Let's just make these absolute so they don't move. And we'll go like this, and we'll just copy this down. And so now we can actually see the differences on those. So we just made it our own delimiter, and it's looping through all of these cells in this range. Maybe you want it to go through and say, okay, let's make sure they're all lowercase first. So maybe that's the thing, like we want this first one to have an upper at the first character, and you can really adjust that in your formula. There's different functions, upper, lower. They don't have proper like they do in regular Excel, which is really nice, where it kind of just figures out what you're doing. But this can be one thing that you might want to be able to use. Okay. Oops. Okay. So just some additional topics. So in Excel, in our functions, we can actually write this little law. Application volatile is true or false. Has anyone here had to turn on or off calculations in your spreadsheet before? Anyone? Yeah. And we do that because maybe, for example, it takes so long to calculate something. We don't want to recalculate, because every time you enter a formula on your worksheet, everything on your sheet actually recalculates. In VBA, you can actually turn that off. So even if you hit calculate, it won't calculate that. And it says application volatile, true or false. We use a textbook in my class, and the author recommends always putting true, because that's just your standard expectation. If you leave it off, Excel kind of defaults to that. So let me just show you where we'd put that in. In our functions, a lot of times you'll put, so with just right under function, we would just put application volatile, and you'll notice it should start to IntelliSense start to figure out what you're doing, and then we'll hit tab and we'll hit plus, and then we'll do true. Maybe you don't want it to refresh every time. We do, but maybe you don't. Maybe you want it to be like a timestamp. Maybe you want to create your own timestamp, and you're saying this happens one time, you never change this value unless you actually open up that formula by doing this. And the only thing that would cause it to recalculate is by opening it up, clicking into it like this, and hitting enter, and that would cause it to actually generate that value. So the application volatile says this is once forever or not forever, I guess. Like you want it to change probably, and because maybe you have new data put in, maybe you get a new report from your database guy, and he says, oh, now you should be able to find all those things that you're looking for that you couldn't find with your VLOOKUP before, because you're saying I've got 900 things I can't find, and on this great report you gave me that's like 5 months old, and so that's just one other use case. We talked a little bit about speed, the speed of functions, and you'll really start to notice if your functions really start to get long and complicated, they start to slow down because maybe you're using variants. So you can try by changing those into the actual data types that they are. Also, one thing about functions is they are extremely fast compared to a sub. They run instantaneously, and that's just because that's what Excel is designed for. A sub procedure actually runs really slowly. So my teacher that I work for, we have our grading system, and we have Excel projects, and he emails them. You email them to the professor, he downloads them, and then he has a Excel thing. So what it does, the sub is a program. So it opens up their workbook, and it plops in a template, and all it has is functions in it. And the functions run like 1 second. He can grade an assignment just by using functions, because it says within the function we're saying, okay, look at this cell, see if it contains an ampersand, or you can test a lot of things. Did they bold it? Did they use this specific format that we're looking for? Did they add color to the background? And you can check things like that for writing functions, and it's really, really quick. He wrote it first to do a sub procedure. So go to the one cell, check it, and he just kind of had this variable that was counting the score at the end. And he was like, it just was taking so long. And then I was doing some research, and he's like, I wrote it into functions. He's like, and I literally cut down the time that I was spending grading. I mean, it's obviously automatic, so he's not really doing anything anyway. But he said it was like 90%. He really sped it up because the functions really, you put them in with the code, they calculate instantaneously. They're not running, they do run line by line. That is how Excel VBA is programmed to run. It runs line by line compiling rather than
loading the entire thing like Java or other languages that do that, which I prefer honestly, but that's just a personal thing. Yeah, so, and another thing, just kind of talking about when to use a sub, when to use a function. Functions are primarily designed for output. So like I said at the beginning, so that's why we're using functions, just like in Excel. You're saying, okay, I'm gonna give you this whole list of numbers and you're gonna give me the sum of the output if you're using the sum. Or if you look up, let me give you the criteria, like this is what you can look at, and I'm gonna give you the exact output. It's just one output. You're not looking for it to change your worksheet. Functions aren't designed to, sometimes you can trick Excel into doing that, but it's really not what it's for. That's, if you're wanting to change like a tab or add a tab, that's more of a sub procedure. But if you're looking to see maybe true or false, does this tab with name like student list, is that even on my worksheet in the first place, true or false? That's a great time to use functions. And the nice thing is once you use these functions, you can actually use them within your sub procedures. And because maybe you're saying, okay, I wrote this really slick function that pulls out the username, which I'll show you how to do in just a second. I actually use this a lot when I'm programming. Well, let's see, I've got a thing here. I finished my project, so what's next? Make a spreadsheet and track something. Track what? I think you'll find that it doesn't matter. So, because I know everybody's got 800 spreadsheets that they're tracking whatever on their computer, but it's kind of a joke there. Some functions that I actually use a lot are username, because I like to stamp a lot of stuff that I'm doing to say like, so if I use it, I'm logged into Logan, for example, on my computer, I want to show that I did that functionality, and it gives it a kind of a stamp, and that kind of gives it unique. You can also pull out computer names. You can really pull out a lot of stuff by using these functions, and maybe you want to use it in your worksheet. So I wrote this function here. So this function right here is just called username. Let's see, let's go back over to our VBA editor here. Let's go like this, hit enter. And I'm going to change our comment here just because that's how they copy. So function pulls username from the computer and outputs it. So if you go like this and say equals username, so you'll notice that it doesn't take any inputs. And you'll notice, and some things in Excel don't take any inputs because they're just returning a value. So we'll just do open close parenthesis, and because we're not giving it any input. So if we hit that, you should get your username of your computer. So I don't know if anybody's following along, but you should pull back if you're on Windows. I think if you're on Mac, it'll probably just like blow up. I honestly don't know what would happen. I haven't tested this out on a Mac computer, but well, on Mac Excel. So I apologize. But I think you actually can do application.username, and it gives like the full name. You could try that to see if that works. But a lot of these Environ variables that we're using over here, that's a lot of Windows. So I'm saying, okay, give me the username. There's a whole list of things that you can have it give. You can have it give the computer name. You can have it give, like, I think you can get the network address, like, and some of those things might be valuable to you. And maybe you want to import that right to your spreadsheet. This might be a place where you might want to turn application volatile to false, because you want this to output something. So then when you open on another computer, you don't want that to change to Jennifer or Kelsey or whoever's computer you're on. Open up my spreadsheet and I said, well, this says that I did this. You're like, well, not exactly. I actually did that, but it's just a little stamp in there, I wrote another function that I think you'll find useful, and I think that I noticed Excel has fixed some of these things. So let's do this. It's called get folder name. So maybe you want to output onto your spreadsheet where something's saved, but you don't know the exact location, but you want that exact file path because maybe you need it to import somewhere, or you're saying, oh, just look at the spreadsheet. I have it saved there at the bottom, but rather than going to the Windows Explorer and copying those out and maybe having to change the direction of the slashes, you can actually write this great function here, and let's copy this into ours. Oops, let's go like this. And I put some variations here, but this one says we're actually going to use the folder picker. You can do a file picker and all these other things. And all this is going to do is output the folder name of something that we're saving. So let's go get folder name.
And it doesn't take any inputs because we're not giving it inputs. It's going to pop up a window to allow us to give an input. So we'll do this. Oh, expected end. Oh, you might just have to put end function here. Just hit play here. So you notice, oh, here, let's stop. Okay, let's do this again. So equals get folder name, right? We'll hit enter here. And oh, it pops up this lovely, great window. And you can click on here and you can say, okay, maybe I want it to be, maybe I'm sending someone my project from AIS 402, and I want them to know this location for whatever reason. And you notice how it says folder name here? We'll click OK, and oh, it just outputs right there onto my screen what the file path is there, which I think can be quite useful. Let's just change this. Let's put a comment here on this first one, and let's do an actual file. Oops, let's leave that. Let's do a file. So let's change this now. So now it's going to let us actually choose a file. Changes how it looks over here because now it's going to actually let us select a file. So you see it says file name here rather than folder. So maybe I want to do 404 and I want to do this like sprint1 implementation. I need to know that file name. And oh, actually it shows this whole file name. Let's make this bigger so you can see it. Ooh, it's a long path. And you actually see it has the document type because maybe you want, because this could be useful, maybe you want to loop through all the things in a folder and you want to just have it output how many docx are we using, how many doc are we using other file formats. Maybe you could sum up all the different ones and just have it output into like a string or something. And that's just kind of another neat way to use this. Or maybe you'll use it in a sub that you need to actually save a new file. Maybe you're wanting to overwrite this file by using some sort of sub procedure, but it'd be great to write a function and just use that within your sub procedure. So let's see. And I think that actually concludes what I'm going to talk about today, but does anyone have any questions that maybe we can talk about? Any other questions that you have, like in general about Excel or VBA or anything like that that I can hopefully answer for you? Or anything that wasn't clear here? Or was it that thorough that, yeah.
What was the link to the PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah. That's a great. Okay, let's do this the easier way. It's on Slack, but I also put, so you should be able to download this. So you can just go to this tinyurl.com ktgpcnc.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah. Most of my experience with Excel is just from working with it. One of my favorite resources is Mr. Excel. I think he's one of the best things. I also subscribe to the Excel or the Spreadsheet Guru. He sends out a lot of things, like he sends like he's just a financial advisor who has this great website, and once a week he sends out an email that says, hey, here are some great things that you should be able to do in Excel. And like, oh, you want to learn how to customize the ribbon and make your own icons? Well, here, just follow my tutorial. Or this week I'm going to show you. Here, he has one about functions, and he says, oh, let's look to see if things are bolded or not, or italicized, or background color. And he shows you how to write those functions. And once a week he gives those, and it actually like kind of sparks like, oh, I've been doing this manually, or I guess I can look up if things are bolded. I don't know. We're in IS, right? So we want to know weird stuff like that. And you're like, oh, I got to see how many characters are bolded on my screen, and why that's important to us, who knows? But that's just what we do, right? Mr. Excel's one, and then there's the Spreadsheet Guru. I think it's spreadsheetguru.com. He's a really good one. Yeah.
How often do you find yourself in the situation where you talked about, where you make your 20-hour task into a 1-hour task, and then don't really know what to do with yourself? How often is that a?
So this is my wife, and hi her. Something for me, like, so I spend a lot of time in Excel. I have a personal budget in Excel, and it's been taking me so long. I spend 10 hours a week working on it because I'm like a weirdo, and like I have a month-end process. It's really in depth. She doesn't like to look at it because it's just too much going on. So I actually spent some time. I was like, gosh, this really takes me a long time to do this. So instead of actually like looking at all my transactions, open up each of my credit cards and entering each transaction, what category, I actually wrote a macro that scrapes the web. And do you want to see it? I can.
I was actually thinking of that exact project because I want to do like syntax analysis to put in categories what I'm spending and things like that.
I guess I'll show you. This project I literally just finished like a week or two ago, so hopefully it works. I was using Mint, so yeah, so you can see all my data here. You'll notice I have like thousands of transactions here. But see, I was entering all these and they took me so long to see. I have all these like, okay, I gotta like balance. I guess I'll just show you guys. There's a lot of stuff on just, this is the dashboard. But so these are the transactions. I have a plan here that's planning all this stuff. We have an asset tracker because we own a home. We're trying to calculate like how we're optimizing paying off our debt. We have our income thing, and there's all these hidden things on here. There's a full year to kind of look at a full year scheme. We're looking at our vehicles. I was looking at whether this is an analysis here to check to see when it's cheaper to ride the bus or not. So you can actually take a look at that, and you can actually take these little sliders, and if you start to adjust the gas prices, it'll actually start adjusting this. And it'll, because it's trying to find, I'm trying to find the optimum time to be taking the train rather than driving to school. So gets a little crazy, but what I'm really most proud of right now is this lovely thing. So we'll hit this run update, and hopefully it's not gonna bug out. So I got my phone because I'm using mint.com to do this. So actually notice it's gonna go here, and it's gonna start going like this. Put all my stuff in. It might ask for multi-factor authentication, so that's why I keep my phone out. I should just click never on here. So it downloaded CSV off this file here. And then this comes back to this screen, so eventually it should, oh no. This should work, come on. You can do it. Okay, so batch complete. So now it's gonna actually let me, any second now, please work. We could rerun it, it won't. Okay, so now, oh, that's weird. Oh, there we go. So now it's actually, if you notice these transactions, these are, so like I went to Wendy's on the 11th, so now I'm like, okay, so now I need to go in here and I'm like, okay, that was me, so I'll put Logan lunch or something on here, but I'll also put the category in here, so this is our eating out category, so I'll hit add next. Let's go like, come on. There you go. So this pops up and I start, so it's going through all the transactions that I haven't matched yet onto my budget. So now it's saying, okay, like this one, I actually don't account for this, so it's going to be a match only, so I don't want it to do anything. We just bought plane tickets to go to Vermont, so this is going to go to our travel savings. Hit add next, and then I'm just going to hit skip because I don't want to do, maybe I don't have time to do these today, so I'm just going to hit skip all, and we'll hit skip. And you actually, it's calculating in the bottom corner here as it's adding the transactions, like it was showing the percentage complete. And I have this lovely here, and it actually says complete, and we'll scroll down to the, hang on, let me just zoom out of here. Now if we go down to the bottom here, oops. You'll notice that those accounts that we just matched in here. So first of all, there's the match only that we put in here, so it comes in at 0. And here are the different airfares and the other accounts, and it puts them right on the right account, which then flows into my spreadsheet and all that other stuff. So that's going to save me like a couple hours a week. So that's a lot of savings for me. So. And within here, yeah. So let me just show you, just because it kind of does tie into this. So this VBA. So this is all the code that I wrote for it right here. But it's also, I wrote a Python. So it's actually, the web scraper's in Python. So it actually executes, so I should write 3 things. I learned how to code in MS-DOS. We're coding in Python in my class this semester, so I just wrote it in that way. And so I wrote a little script that actually runs that, executes the Python statement, which is what you saw scraping off of mint.com. And then loads the CSV to a specific spot on my computer. And ta-da, and here you go. So I'm going to make it open source because there aren't any good resources online for this. So any other questions before we, yeah.
So I'm working on a project with the flag have all these episodes in a folder,
Okay.
and just like on your last map that you showed us, and you output the file directory. I want to rename them to a certain way. Is there a way to do that?
You can.
In Excel, or
Yeah,
would I-
there is actually a way. So in my file, so you can do basically like anything in Excel, in my opinion. I talked to a lady one time, she said, Excel can do everything. It could even bake bread. If you showed it how, it could do it. And that's how I feel. Excel is always open on my computer. I'm power user. My first option is try it in Excel. If it works, you can rename files in the directory. So basically it runs like a command prompt thing. It says, okay, go to this folder, and maybe you want to rename them like you've edited them or something. And you can actually have it quickly adjust all those folders or
one column and then to another column, and you can rename.
yeah, and you probably want to write a sub to do that because that would just be executing commands probably in like a loop or something. But yeah, so my spreadsheet actually downloads that CSV and then I actually delete it off my computer because I don't want to keep that on there. Or what I could do is save it to a folder like, oh, these are my previous imports from mint.com. But for me, I can always go and download it again, and it downloads really quickly. So it downloads all of your transaction history. So yeah. Any other questions? These are good. These are great questions. Okay. Yeah.
So I noticed that there's a save button on both the workbook and then also on the VBA editor. So when I hit save on the VBA editor, is that also saving?
It should. They run the exact same
because a lot of people, when they're running the VBA window, it usually is in full screen like this. And I think that's why they just put this here, so you can just hit save. It runs the same function, and if you notice, if you hover over this, it says, oh, it's saving the Baranowski budget, for example, here. Control S, same thing, so. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, yeah.
Sorry, teaching here. Are you done?
No, I'm just a teaching